And we will now continue with our next female keynote speaker. Her name is Katharina Moser, and she's the founder of MOSAIK. Please welcome to Katharina.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's check if this works. I suppose it does. Yes, my story starts with a gin tonic, which is always a good thing on a lazy Monday afternoon. Well, actually, it's a story that happened a few weeks ago, just before the summer started. And the gin tonic was basically the reason how a work colleague got me to come with him on a business meeting, where he met up with this couple from Germany. It was this elderly couple. They were rather wealthy, from Nuremberg, very nice, immediately kind of got on well, until they asked me the typical questions, what do you do? And I started my pitch. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for 5 years now. I've kind of told my story once or twice. I told them how I fell in love with Europe when I was 18, how I founded my agency 5 years ago, and how with this agency, with MOSAIK, I design projects and products and events that are supposed to foster a positive European spirit. Like I said, I've told this story several times before, and usually the answer that I get is, oh, that's unusual, but really good. Europe, that's an important topic. Good that you're working on this. And this time it was different. Her reaction was something like, all right, well, I don't feel European. You know, every time when I see in my clothes a label that shows something like made in Poland or made in Bulgaria, I get annoyed because I just don't like the Eastern European countries. And he looked at me pretty much the same, and he's also like, why? Why should we feel European? So that was an interesting encounter that I hadn't really expected, and it kind of led me thinking. And that's why I want to put this question at the beginning of my little speech or presentation here. Why should we even feel European? For me, the problem is pretty obvious, and probably for the most of you here as well. And it can be summed up quite well by the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Mohammed El-Baradei, who said, either we're going to succeed all together or we're going to fail one after the other. So when we look at the challenges that we're facing right now, Sustainable Development Goals, I would say all 17 concern all of us. There isn't a single one where you could say, all right, we as Austria, we are only concerned here, or we as Austria, we can only we can solve it by ourselves. At the same time, when you look at how the world works these days, China is gaining more and more power. Russia is obviously interested in disuniting Europe, and America is kind of isolating itself. The head of the Munich Security Conference, Wolfgang Ischiker, recently said that he feels like we're standing at the beginning of this new era. So in this geopolitical situation, Europe, with its, or the European Union rather, with its 500 million citizens, is 7%, that looks weird, and 7% of the world's population are those 500 million citizens, and we only allocate for a landmass of 3% of the world. So the question is, do we as 28 or maybe soon 27 single pieces really think that we can reach more as what we could reach together? Well, my answer is no, I don't think so. I actually think we should put SDG number 17 as our most important one, because SDG number 17 is the one who said we should build corporations in order to reach the other 16 goals. So it seems pretty logical that we as Europeans should actually stand together and cooperate. And that's true, it might be logical, but it's also the point that quite often we think people are logical, whilst we're not. We're emotional beings. Emotions are our biggest driving force. They do not only determine which breakfast we have, or what clothes we wear, or what job we take, or what partner we fall in love with, but they also determine our worldview and our political convictions. Therefore, it's truly important to acknowledge the importance of emotions, because we will not be able to solve all our problems if we do not feel that we actually belong together. Hence, feeling European is not just a nice to have anymore. Feeling European has actually become a crucial condition in solving our continent's problems. Last year I was at a panel as well, and I said something along those lines, and there was someone else sitting at a panel with me, and she said, yeah, it's really nice when we're all cuddly in Europe and we like each other, but the thing that's really important is the rule of law, or the thing that's really important is the single market. And I say, no. I think it's really important that we do cuddle much more in Europe, and that we do like each other much more in Europe, and that we should actually start taking this more serious. So, the ones who know how to use those emotions best, oh yeah, that's for the Austrians, are the right wings. They have acknowledged the importance of emotions, and they communicate much more on an emotional level. Whereas the pro-Europeans are busy trying to explain rationally the advantages of the European Union. These are the ones who are actually dealing with emotions. And as we have seen in EU elections, they've again reached more seats in the parliament, and they've again gained size in Europe. There's this book by Gustave Le Bon that probably most of you have heard about, who wrote in 1895 already, in his classic on the psychology of masses, that when you speak to individuals, you can easily convince them with arguments, but as soon as you're dealing with masses, they react to stories and they react to emotions. There is a scientist from Germany, her name is Julia Ebner, very interesting, she was only born in 1991, and she has a book called Wut, or Anger, and in this book she describes tactics that right-wing extremists use as much as fundamental Islamists use, and she calls it the Star Wars effect, which is quite a nice description for saying that they use a tactic of simply putting out good and bad stories. There's always someone who's good, there's always someone who's bad. Simple stories. And this is a quote that I quite like. For every complex problem, there's a solution that is simple, neat, and wrong. This tactic of simplification fits perfectly into our times. Due to digitalization, this constant connectivity, and constant information overflow, we're actually all completely over-challenged. In the past 10 years, our attention span has gone down from, well, again, this doesn't really look like I prepared it. Anyway, it went down from 12 seconds to just 8 seconds. 8 seconds. I mean, I don't know how long I've talked already. I hope I still have bits of your attention, because I think I overstepped 8 seconds. When in the 80s, there were actually still teachers who were trying to explain to their students how computers work. When you look at the world that we're living in today, we are surrounded by things we don't understand, and we don't even try. We've just acknowledged that we don't understand, and that's fine for us. But that means that the ones who are trying to communicate to us, or who are selling the world to us, have become more and more important. And here we're talking about fake news. Fake news are, well, it's not that we didn't have them years ago, but they are growing more and more these days. And they've actually become quite a threat to democracies, as they increasingly challenge what we understand as basis for democracy, which is informed citizens. So, I don't know, have any of you watched this film, Cambridge Analytica, the big hack on Netflix already? Quite interesting. I mean, you could also kind of wonder, why does Netflix show us this film, which is another topic. But generally, I suppose most of us understand the tactic that has been used by Cambridge Analytica in order to tackle voters, not only with the Brexit, but also with the Trump elections, which basically works in a way that they create personal psychological profiles based on our data points that we spread all over the internet. every like is a data point, and they probably know far more about me than my mother or even myself, simply based on my behavior online. Same happened with Brexit, and I suppose most of you will have also seen this film Brexit, the Uncivil War, which I also found quite interesting, talking about Dominic Cummings, the political strategist behind the whole campaign, who tried to reach, and obviously also quite successfully did it. He tackled the 3 million non-voters, so exactly those people who would usually not be that involved in political processes, with fake news. And we all know about the 300 million pounds that go to the EU instead of the NHS. And I suppose we also know that this same Dominic Cummings is now special advisor to Boris Johnson. On a side note, I just want to mention this thing. I heard about it last year at the EuropeCom. It's a Dutch startup that was founded by Ruud Oosterboet. And basically what they do is they created a game that teaches people how to create fake news. And by teaching them how to actually do it, they make them far more resilient against it, because people learn how it works. And I just kind of want to spread the word about it because I think it's a brilliant idea. So when we look at Brexit, or when we look at the election of Trump, we have to be aware that there are new forces in power these days when it comes to our democracies. And also that these forces are quite often used on the people who are usually not that engaged, on non-voters. And in context, I find it quite interesting to quote Hannah Arendt, who in 1951 said that democracy does not necessarily represent the opinion of the majority, but the opinion of an involved, privileged minority. And that this only works as long as the masses feel they're somehow involved. But as soon as the masses feel like they're left aside, they actually take to the polls. And she said that the best remedy actually against totalitarianism, and I quite like that, is to make sure that people don't feel isolated and they don't feel alone, they don't feel left aside by democracy. So looking at stuff like the European Union, that's actually quite complex. And I, for myself, understand that not everyone has the time and the energy in his life to actually understand how this works. I don't even understand all of it. And we all know that the major mistake of the Brexit referendum was the attempt to boil down something as complex as the membership of the European Union into a simple yes or no question. The world is simply not as black and white. So looking at what I just said, the challenging fact remains. Even if we're over-challenged by the times that we're living in, and this constant information overflow, we cannot let ourselves be lured in with simple stories or simple yes and no answers. We need to deal with the complexity of the world. And by that, I do not only mean the facts and figures, but I also mean the emotional side that is a huge part of that complexity. I believe the question that we will have to deal with far more will be, do we decide to seclude ourselves into our small little shelters and with our inner groups of people that are just like us and that we trust? Or do we actually dare to open up our eyes to the diversity of the world? Jean-Claude Juncker said a few years ago, we Europeans simply don't know enough about each other. We have to fall more in love with each other. Quite a Juncker quote. And as banal as it sounds, I think if we want to understand the reality of Europe, we simply have to get to know each other. What happens if we don't do that, if we don't deal with the diversity and complexity of it, can be seen, for instance, with the results of the AfD, the German right-wing party, which are the highest in areas where there are hardly any foreigners. Or the EU Cohesion Monitor 2019 by the European Council of Foreign Relations shows that actually in countries where the exchange with other citizens from other European member states, in countries where that exchange is the lowest, that would be Hungary and Greece. And these are both countries with quite strong right-wing parties. Another study by the Mercator Stiftung says the personal encounters contribute much more to cooperation and peace than any structural fund or any single market ever could. And I think we can all sympathize with that, because as soon as you've been to this country, or as soon as you know someone from a different country, you get more interested in the whole country as such. You're more willing to read a newspaper article or to watch a documentary about this country simply because you have a personal connection. Therefore, it should truly concern us that 190 million EU citizens have never left their own country. On the other hand, there has hardly been any project that's been as successful when it comes to European integration process than Erasmus. It's created thousands of friendships and love relationships, and in 30 years it enabled 9 million young people to actually go abroad, and also, on a side note, create 1 million Erasmus babies. A similar approach is a bit less elitist, and I'm sure you all know about it as well, is Free Interrail, who has enabled, it started as an idea of two 18-year-old students, and now it emerged into a huge pilot project called Discover EU that already enabled in 2018 30,000 18-year-olds to travel with a free Interrail ticket through Europe. This year it was 50,000 tickets, and in the new budget period they allocated enough money for 1.5 million young people to travel to other European countries. So, it is this exchange with Europe's diversity that allows a European identity and a European feeling to grow. And this is also what I try to do with my projects at MOSAIK, so I'm just trying to showcase some of the projects that we've been doing and share them with you. And funnily enough, all the 3 projects I'm just going to present to you now all started with a single encounter. The first idea was born a few years ago when I sat together with a friend who's French, and he's got a games publishing house, and he said, look, you've been always doing so much on the topic of Europe, and I've got a games publishing house, but there isn't a single game on Europe that's fun. So we thought, all right, let's create it. So we created a card game on Europe. It's called Come On Over, or Come to Me, or Viens chez moi, so in 3 languages. And what it does, contains fun facts about different European countries. The idea is that players actually then have to invent stories around those fun facts, and with that they play. So it's a storytelling game where they have to convince each other to come on over to their country. So whilst people actually play this game, first they learn about fun facts about different European countries, and those facts are more likely to stick with them than the usual facts and figures. So since we're talking about Great Britain here today, I thought at least I should share one fun fact about Great Britain, because I'm already, like, my heart is bleeding. If they're leaving, I'm going to have to change my game, and I have to take those fun facts out. So there is a thing in Great Britain called ferret legging. Anyone's ever heard of this? Right. The way it works is that men, full grown-up men, actually stuff living ferrets into their trousers, no underpants, and they see how long they can last, simply to prove their masculinity. I think the world record is 4.5 hours. Feel free to use that fun fact at the next Brexit discussion. Right. So this is one thing that it does, and the other thing is also that people actually think about the stereotypical ideas that they might have about specific countries. For instance, what do you think, which country is it where the gender gap when it comes to income is the slowest? So basically income is fairest between men and women. What do you think? Give me any guesses. Oh yeah, I have to add, it's only about the 28 current EU member states. Right, yeah? Yeah. See, that's the usual, exactly, all up in the north. No, actually, the country where it's the fairest is Slovenia, so no one really would have expected that. So basically, this is what it does, and the way how we use it is also, I've got a few examples outside, you can have a look at them later on. We do not simply sell them on the games market, but we actually contributed, or we designed them in a way so that they can be used by institutions like the European Commission or MEPs, who then use them in their communication with citizens. So basically, it's just like a pen, but just that people can do a bit more with it than a pen. Second project I want to talk about also started with an encounter I set together, again, with a friend. We were talking about, so why do we actually feel European and why do we think it's a positive thing? So my personal European story is that when I was 18, I went to Spain and I did a European voluntary service there. So I taught German at a language school, basically. And I lived with 8 people from 6 different European countries in a flat. Typical l'auberge espagnole. So we exchanged cooking recipes and we taught each other our languages and we became friends. And basically for me, that was the first time that the abstract idea of Europe became something tangible and something emotional. And for him, for my friend, it was more or less the same. He had an Erasmus experience like that. And we thought, okay, if we can have that experience, other people should have that experience as well, because this is exactly what makes you European. What I said before, 190 million people have never left their country. So we thought, okay, if people don't go to Europe, we bring Europe to where they are. And this is how we started this idea. It's called Roots, or at the beginning it was actually called Roots 28. Then Brexit happened. And then I thought I'll change the title. So now it's called Roots. And it's a European journey in the middle of Vienna. The way it worked is that it was an open, free public event where we brought together people at a main station here in the Museumsquartier in Vienna. We started it in 2016, in 17 and 18 we had some 800 participants. So we brought them all together at the main location. We separated them into smaller groups who each had a guide, and the guide would then take them to different stations in a city, each representing a different European country. So for instance, in Poland, they could cook Polish pierogi. In Italy, they were taught how to use Italian gestures. Or in Belgium, they could learn how to draw Belgian Smurfs. And in the end, we brought them all together to this European station, which was here in the Volksgarten, to basically just show to them that experiencing this diversity, this is basically what Europe is all about, and this is what makes us European. Oopsie, next one. So, yes, we organized that 3 years in a row. It was this one-day event, rather successful, won the Austrian State Award in Europe and the European Citizens Award. And I always quite like to stress that in the surveys that we did, where we asked people, would you like to come again, we got a North Korean result by 100% saying that they liked it so much they would like to come again. So, third project I'd like to tell you about is this one, Fuck Up Nights. Who knows Fuck Up Nights? Yay, one. All right, just a short explanation to the ones who think like, oh my God, Fuck Up Nights. So this is actually an event series. It comes from Mexico, and by now it exists in 300 cities all over the world. The way it works, it comes from the startup scene, and the way it works is that there are 3 to 4 speakers each time who talk about their personal failures and their fuck-ups with their business. So, I don't know, they had the wrong co-founder, an investment didn't work, something like that. And the idea is that through that, they want to strengthen a positive failure culture, which is maybe not exactly what Europe is famous for, and actually learn from each other's failures, which I think is a brilliant idea. So at the beginning of this year, I got to know the founder of the Vienna Fuck Up Nights, Dejan Stojanovic, and he said, fuck-ups, and I said, Europe, and that's why we did a European edition right before the European elections, talking about fuck-ups in Europe, because we thought there might be one or two. And to me, the most impressive speaker was this guy. His name is Christian Weisgerber. I see someone nodding. He was quite impressive. He stepped on stage in Austria in front of 250 people, and his opening sentence was, I am not a Nazi, but I used to be one. So he told us his personal story of how he actually became a Nazi when he was a young guy, and also how he grew out of it. And what I found very impressive was 2 things. First, he not once in this 20-minute speech tried to get out of his responsibility. He didn't blame it on his childhood or his abusive father or anything else. He took full responsibility for the beliefs that he had. And this coincidentally happened a week after Ibiza, so I found that even more impressive. And secondly, when we asked him, so how did you get out of this? And he was quite a head figure in the scene. He didn't tell us about this one moment or this epiphany where he suddenly realized how everything he believed in was wrong. But he told us that he simply started talking more to the people from the other side, from the Antifa. And he actually started exchanging with them online, then he met up with them, he actually became friends, he understood their point of views. So a main head in the neo-Nazi scene actually managed to turn around his beliefs simply through encounters with other people. And I think that is quite powerful. So this is what we want to do with MOSAIK and with all the projects that I just presented to you. We want to create exchange, encounters, and the possibility to engage with the diversity of Europe. Because only then can we actually start to feel that we're part of this. So coming back to the gin tonic. If my colleague will ask me again, do you want to have a gin tonic tonight? What am I going to do? Am I going to say yes? I probably will. Not only because I will always say yes if someone offers a gin tonic, but also because I believe we have to deal with that complexity. And we also have to deal with the opinions that we do not agree with and simply see that they're out there and confront ourselves with it. So if this guy asks me again, why should he feel European? I would say, it's not for me. I don't mind if you feel European or not. I think it would enrich your life, because instead of taking simple black and white answers as a solid solution for the problems of our times, and instead of separating Europe into good countries and bad countries, it would actually add color to his life to look and understand the diversity and the complexity of Europe. Because in the end, to me, this is actually what Europe is all about. I don't believe that feeling European means that we all have to be the same. I think feeling European is the ability to actually deal with our differences and the willingness to see them as a chance rather than a threat. I think only then will we be able to actually find solutions together. And quite often, that might start with simply one encounter. Thank you very much.